Okay, we're live. Good evening, friends. I, Momita Pal, welcome you to the Stories of Beliefs and Social Customs under TMYS Review, June 2022, in collaboration with Global South Colloquium, University of Victoria. We are calling for submissions of essays, poems, and short stories under the project. To know more about the submission guidelines and the project architecture, please visit www.tellmeastory.biz. This evening, I consider myself very privileged to be in the company of our esteemed panelist, author Ovirup Dhar, Mr. Neil De Salva, and Professor Aparijita Hajra to share their views and insights. The topic of today's discussion is paranormal or urban legends and related superstitions defining social identity. All they are experts in this area with many years of professional experience. So, before we start today's discussion, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our speakers. Our first panelist tonight is Mr. Avirup Dhar. Mr. Dhar was born in Kolkata and has lived in various cities and towns. A banker by profession, he is passionate about writing. He is the author of the Hole That Breathes series, The Belvoir Brook Haunting, Stories Are Magical, and Once Again with Love. His latest book, Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari, which set a record by being acquired for screen adaptation before its release. All his horror outings have topped the bestseller charts and met with tremendous acclaim. He is also a screenwriter now. Midday calls him the most acclaimed name in Indian horror writing. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Momita.
Our second esteemed panelist is Dr. Aparijita Hajra. She is a professor in the Department of English Diamond Harbour Women's University, West Bengal, India. She has served as Dean of the Faculty of Arts and the head of the Department of English in SKB University, India. She has acted as director of the Center for Women's Studies and the director of the Center for Foreign Language Studies there. A gold medalist and a national scholar, she is the recipient of the Nobel Asian Educational Leader Award for 2020 from Easter Philippines, the National Faculty Award for 2021 and 22 from NRA Pondicherry, and the Excellence Award in English Literature from IMRF. She is the author of 5 books and numerous literary articles in various national and international journals and newspapers, and has lectured extensively in seminars and webinars in India and abroad. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today. Our third
Thank you,
panelist
Momita. Pleasure's
is
all mine.
Mr. Neil De Silva. With 12 books to his credit, Neil De Silva is a known name in the Indian literary world. His unique stories have struck a chord with a wide range of readers, eliciting praise from various quarters. He is published with leading publishers such as Penguin Random House, Rupa Publication, and Hachette, among the others, and has owned screen adaptation deals on 4 of his books. He has been named as one of the top 7 Indian horror writers to be read by UK Desi Blades magazine. His books have been listed on Monster Complex, The Curious Reader, among other prestigious book lists. Considered as one of the forerunners of contemporary Indian horror literature, he has been covered by several leading publications and is invited to speak at prominent lit fests around the country, including Times Lit Fest, Pune International Literature Festival, Noida International Literature Festival, Simla International Literature Festival, and Yayavar Jammu Literature Festival, among others. He is also writing mentor with the Scholastic Writers Academy and has conducted writing workshops at institutions such as IIT Kanpur, among others. His TED Talk on the art of writing a bestseller is available on YouTube. Neil De Silva is the president of India Chapter Horror Writers Association. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Momita. Thanks.
And I am Momita Pal, a scholar of English literature. I have completed my post graduation in English from Bangalore University and also have qualified UGC NET with JRF in June 2020. I have been working with Tell Me a Story as a senior project assistant for the last 1 year. So now we open the forum for discussion. First, I would like to call upon Mr. Avirup Dhar to share his views on today's topic. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Momita, for the wonderful introductions, and that's a fantastic moderation that you're doing there, right? Thank you, Koral Das Gupta. Thank you, Suhel Mathur, for having us. It's a very interesting topic, and let's understand what we mean by social identity first, what we understand by superstitions first, and what we understand by urban legends first. So, social identity is, what exactly are we? Who are we? Who exactly are we depending on what characteristics we have, what interests we have, what are the basic, nature traits that we have, which, identify with a certain community. For example, a religion. So, religion can also be, a social identity. It can also be something like, sports, that is also community. So, that also gives you a social identity. And what exactly is superstition? So superstition is anything which you are believing in absence of any proof or any evidence. If it's a ritual, or if it's a you know practice which you have been following, but then there is no proof for it, that is a superstition. It's something which you have been following because you want to have a sense of control. I feel that when you're superstitious, you have this, complex kind of a thing wherein you feel that you are losing control of, a certain thing you want to do in life. And then you believe in superstitions. And superstitions can be good and bad as well. So you have got good superstition, like, you wear a t-shirt which you think is lucky when you watch a sports match and you want your favorite team to win. And a bad superstition would be, for instance, a black cat crossing your way and you think it's a bad omen, right? So there are good superstitions and bad superstitions. And what is an urban legend? So an urban legend is basically a myth or a modern folklore which you kind of keep hearing, and it's based on few superstitions. So it's not exactly superstition, it's basically a story or a myth or a modern folklore that you come to hear out of some kind of a superstition. And these are, urban legends which are, catering to different localities, different places, different cities, different states. Fine. So I personally feel that superstitions can definitely, have some kind of an effect on the social identity for sure, but not an urban legend. An urban legend is more of a myth. It's more of a folklore. It's more of, a story which can be part fiction, part true. Probably you have been hearing about it over the many years. It's been passed down the generations to you. There might be some kind of a truth attached to it, but it also can be a little exaggerated. So an urban legend to me does not affect social identity, but yes, superstitions do affect your social identity. Superstitions can be of various natures. So for example, you have some kind of you think of cutting nails in the evenings is supposed to be a bad omen. For example, you would not like to cut nails, or you'd not like to cut your hair in the evenings. But then you know what exactly superstitions are. Superstitions are basically yesterday's knowledge and today's superstitions. So if yesterday uh, people didn't cut nails because it was evening and it was dark and there was no electricity, it's been passed down the generations, and you now tell people that you don't cut nails in the evening, or it's going to be a bad omen. So it's basically been passed down through the various generations to you, and you have been following it over the many years. But what is superstition? Is it happening just like that? You come into the world and you start believing in superstitions? You don't. It's been passed down to you, right? It's a part of your upbringing as well. So your parents must have told you in the childhood that you should not cut your hair in the evening, or you should not cut your nails in the evening, or you should not, you should just stand for some time when a black cat crosses your way. So these are superstitions which are, been passed down generations. It's been told to you by your family members. It's been told to you by people, and that's where you start getting affected in your social life. That's what I feel about superstitions. And urban legend is more of a myth or a more of a folklore which is based on superstitions. It does not affect your social identity. These are more of stories and more of interesting folklores which we horror writers can take influence from and write a story or a book. Momita. That's what I feel about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your insights. Next, I would like to invite Professor Hajra to share her insights on this. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, you are muted. Ma'am, please unmute. Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Uh, okay, so I think Professor Hajra is having some internet issue. So I would like to call upon Mr. Neil De Silva to share his views. Over to you, sir. Then I will come to Professor Hajra.
Thank you so much, Momita. And first and foremost, thanks for having me on this very exciting topic. Beliefs, how they shape our social customs, how they shape our social identity. It pertains so much to our culture, because it is so diverse. India, as I just made a post about the International Mother Language Day, which is today, where I said that every 100 kilometers, our language changes, our native language changes, sometimes even less than that. And that is not just about language, that is also about the entire belief system, the culture that exists, the folklore, the lore, the legends. Each and every aspect of our country changes every few hours that you travel. And with that, that is what makes our country such an amalgamation, such a blend of richness, which is what authors like us delve from, and we take our sources from them. So today, let me focus my talk on speaking about how folklore affects our social identity. Avirup has so nicely explained about what folklore means, what superstitions mean, and I stand by that. So I'll just take that forward. So when we talk about folklore, the folklore is a story that originates in a particular area. Uh, it is basically a story, and I would like to refer to it as a story because if we go back in history, how did our elders leave messages for us? The way that they taught us was through stories. That is how everything was formed. That is how our folk tales came into picture. That is how the Panchatantra came into picture. That is how even our epics were shaped and made, which have endured the ages, which teach us lessons even today. And this is also how folklore uh, originated in various areas. So, if we think about it, what were these lessons that the elders wanted to give us? What were the things that they wanted people to learn through these stories? So, I guess there was a lot of messaging going on there. One of the messaging, most important, was how people, like I mean common people, should learn how to control themselves, to control their lust, to control their emotions. And that is how probably the folklore, the legends of the creatures or entities like the Mohini, the Yakshini, or maybe the Rantas from Kashmir. That is a very fascinating legend. I'll tell you about it. All these were created. So we all are aware of what the Mohini is and what the Yakshini is. But Rantas is this kind of a witch creature who is quite alluring and tempting. And she usually targets the people who are living in the Kashmir houseboats, the young men. But when the young men go after them, they get lost in those jungles, in those coniferous jungles, and they never make their way out. Now, I think these stories were just to tell young men not to stray from the path that they should be on. It was kind of a moral code of ethics which was told through this tale. The tale became a legend, and the legend endured. The creature took a fascinating shape of its own, and that survived. Another reason why these stories might have been formed, which you call them as folklore or superstition or whatever, maybe it was because people wanted to give a voice to their suppressed desires. This is where Shakchuni from Bengal comes in. The Shakchuni, if I'm talking to Bengalis here mostly, so you definitely know what Shakchuni is. The Shakchuni is a woman who dies with her desires unfulfilled, and those desires stay on. And this woman comes back in her afterlife, and when she sees another woman who is living a better life, who has those desires fulfilled which she could not fulfill, the Shakchuni targets her. So this is about desires. There is a better desire-based folklore from Maharashtra. This is the Bayangi spirit. The Bayangi spirit is considered to be a kind of ghost entity which is trapped by a black magician in a coconut, and the coconut is given to the patriarch of a family. Now, whoever the family patriarch, whichever family gets this, is supposed to keep that coconut well hidden. Nobody must be told about it. And that coconut, which has the spirit in it, must be propitiated, venerated, worshipped, given whatever the thing wants. In return, the spirit will make this house bountiful, give you everything that you want. And how it will give you at the cost of taking it from others. So it might happen that in the neighborhood, there is this one house that is flourishing beyond limit, but every other house is completely, totally languishing. They don't even get bhakri to eat in the nights. That kind of dichotomy occurs if you have a Bayangi spirit, if you are worshipping it. But there's this clause that the Bayangi spirit has to be released within 7 years. And if you do not release it within 7 years, then it will backfire. Now, the thing here, the catch here, is that the Bayangi spirit is so controlling and it is so tempting that whichever family owns it does not let it go. The Bayangi weaves its magic in such a way that the family will not let the coconut go. And this is where the message of greed comes in. The greed, message of greed. That means we may get our magical powers. We may get it. We may get everything that we want, maybe by propitiating the right forces. But how far should you go? Isn't this what Aladdin and the magic lamp is also about? It is about testing our own powers. It's about giving us the message of greed. And finally, that takes a shape of a story, and that story endures. Maybe another kind of messaging that was there was simply to instill fear. Fear is a very important thing for us. That's why I write horror, because fear is something that keeps us safe. It keeps us sane. It keeps us away from doing the things that we should not do, like the Chakwa spirit of Maharashtra. Chakwa is, if you go in the jungles of Maharashtra, it is considered, it's believed that there is this one spirit known as the Chakwa. And the Chakwa is a kind of, it creates an impression in you. It makes you hallucinate. It makes you see things that aren't there. And what will happen is you will go deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest, and you will go in circles. You will never be able to find your way out, and you will probably die. Why was the story of Chakwa made? Maybe to prevent people from just wandering into the forests. We have the similar thing, the Alaya lights in the Sundarbans. Now, this we know about the lights that suddenly come in the Sundarbans, and then the people go after them, and then they get lost. Probably this was just for fear that you should not do certain things, uh, and to keep us away from them. There is another reason, probably. Sometimes it was just because things were unknown. So those unknown things took the form of a superstition. In Bengal, I have read about the boba spirit. Now I'll tell you about what it does, and then you can create, and then you will see the parallel between the real life phenomenon that I'm talking about. So the boba is a small, formless, shapeless spirit, but it has tremendous weight. So when you sleep, it's believed that the boba comes and sits on your chest. And if it sits on your chest, the boba will squeeze you with its weight, and it will not let go till the time you admit to your sins or whatever the catch is. So this boba is something that is just going to press you with its weight. You are going to be aware, awake. You're going to probably know that something is on your chest, but you're not going to be able to move. And you're trapped. You're trapped until you face the thing that you have done, which was wrong, and you come out of that. So, what is the boba? Obviously, it is sleep paralysis. So, when sleep paralysis happened to people, today we know that it's a medically proven phenomenon. We know that sleep paralysis does occur. I know it because I am personally a sufferer of it on and off. So, when sleep paralysis occurs, people do not know what to name it. I'm talking about the olden days. So, probably they conjured a spirit, a name, a superstition, a folk tale to explain what it was, and it took form. It took the form of Boba in Bengal. There was the night hag also. There were so many versions of it. So this is one more way of explaining something which is very difficult to explain. Maybe that is how all our monsters and demons came in, because maybe in those olden days there were some species or some creatures that we did not know about, we did not understand, and those just took the form of a myth, and they maybe the creatures went away, they got extinct, or there was some other reason for that, for their disappearance, but the myths remained. They endured. Maybe we put a lot of masala on it. Maybe we gave them attributes that they did not really have. And that's how it went on. Maybe there is one more reason why superstitions come into play. And especially, I'm talking about the superstitions that we horror writers work with. And that is a kind of a soothing balm for us, a kind of a belief in the afterlife. Because it is so frustrating to know that we are alive for a while and then we die. Is death the end? Is everything that we do in this world to no meaning, to no avail? Why do we work? Why do we try to have these kinds of competitions? Or why do we simply slog our entire life? What is the purpose of it? Maybe to give a meaning to it, maybe to give another dimension to it, and just to tell people that okay, life is not only this much, there is something beyond it, that is the afterlife, and that is where your whatever you believe in, hell, heaven exists, and that is where we are all going to, one or the two choices we have to make. That is how even God came into the picture, right? So I think the genesis is mostly similar, whether we are talking about God, or we are talking about the devil, whether we are talking about reality, or whether we are talking about fiction. I think the genesis has been similar, the genesis has been parallel, and that is all a kind of messaging that exists. Coming to the second part of this, how this shapes our society, it definitely shapes our society. Now, if we talk about uh, a myth which comes from a small town area or a village, then I know of villages where the entire village structure or the town structure depends on the myth of a single place or the superstition that is built around a single place. I just have to tell you one word and you will believe me, and that is Kuldhara. When I tell you about Kuldhara, the entire village was abandoned for an unknown reason. And even people who live today in Kuldhara believe that the entire place is haunted. We have so many other places. There is Bhangad, where the Bhangad fort, the entire area around the Bhangad fort is again completely dependent on the myth that built around it. Even today, they cannot come out of it. It's part of their social structure. The web is so intricate. And why are we not talking about Mayong, the birthplace of magic, where everything, every waking moment is about the entire lore that has built around the area about things. And let's not just focus ourselves on the small towns. Anyway, I spoke about Kuldara, Vangad, and Mayong, and maybe Lambi Dehara and all these places which are very famous. But even if you talk about the small time other places, the local rural areas, every area has a myth, and the myth somehow or the other shapes that society. Maybe not directly, but somehow there is a kind of a message that permeates through, and somehow it weaves in their culture. As times change and as people evolve, things also change. The beliefs change, but I think they just get replaced by newer beliefs. So that keeps happening. Urban legends within, let's talk about cities. Like, when Delhi had the monkey man thing, monkey man, it was such a scare all over Delhi, for a few days, of course, but even for those few days, people were scared to venture out of their homes. What was this monkey man? Such a long 9 foot creature, a kind of a monkey, black, hairy, jumping from one building to the other, tree to the other. What was the monkey man? Maybe the monkey man was just a metaphor for all the collective fear that the Delhiites had at that time, because nobody really saw the monkey man. But the monkey man did exist. It was a superstition or a folklore or truth, we'll never know. But it did shape Delhi's environment for a while. And today, even today, 30 years later, we are talking about it. I think it is 30. Mumbai, where I come from, had its own Teen Mundi Ki Chudel in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. So we believe that there was this kind of a witch with 3 heads walking around the streets after 7 p.m. And there was this about a month. I was in college at that time when everything was shut down. People would just go in their houses and not venture out. When this kind of a thing can shake a city like Mumbai, a metro like Mumbai, uh, just think about the rural areas where the consciousness is more profound. One more, the Naliba of Bengaluru. Bengaluru, Naliba, the what was shown in the movies three, though they um, set it in Madhya Pradesh, but it is actually a story from Bangalore. Naliba was again a kind of a witch creature which was supposed to visit the houses at night, and she was kind of stupid. So you just have to write on the door that "Come tomorrow." Naliba in Kannada actually means "come tomorrow," and then she would come tomorrow. So this kind of thing happened. So I've done talking with what I wanted to say, but I hope the message is clear. Like what I don't know whether I made sense or not, but did talk about a few things where lore has shaped our society and all the various interesting folklore that has come from all different parts of India, which really fascinates me to a very, very great extent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. The examples you have given, like Kuldhara or Monkey Man, are really interesting. Thank you for that. So, I think Professor Hajra is still not able to join. Or, ma'am, are you there? Okay. So
Yeah, I
now
am there.
let
Can you hear me?
yes, ma'am.
You
Yes,
can?
ma'am. So
That's great.
yes, ma'am. You are audible. Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, now I would
All right.
request you to share your insights. Over to you, ma'am.
Well, what I hello, hello,
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
great, right. So, good evening, everyone. It's a
Hello.
complete pleasure to be invited to such an interesting panel discussion, and it was a downright pleasure to listen to Abhirup first and then Neil again. And I was just wondering at the repertoire of urban legends and superstitions that India as a country, houses. Now, since both of the speakers before me have talked a lot about urban legends and as well as superstitions, I think I shall deal with more of the raison d'etre behind it, the reasons and the theoretical part of superstitions behind it. Now, because I'm a person from the genre of Gothic literature and I am more into theories, so I think I'll talk a little bit more from the theoretical aspect. Superstition, the word superstition comes from the Latin superstitio, which in turn comes from the etymological roots stare, which means to stand, and super, which means over. So it initially meant to stand over something in awe, in wonder, so there was nothing really pejorative about it. But a little bit later, almost a century later, it acquired a kind of pejorative sense when Theophrastus was the author. He wrote about 30 kinds of man, and the 16th kind of man was the superstitious man. And the superstitious man, according to Theophrastus, he defined superstition. He said that it is, quote unquote, cowardice with regard to the divine. When we are dealing with the divine, a kind of fear, a kind of cowardice that is working with our dealing with the divine, that is what gives birth to superstitions. Later on, Plutarch, when he was writing his essay, the famous essay called On Superstition, he said that the superstitious person is the most pernicious of all, because the atheist doesn't believe in God, but the superstition person, he doesn't want to believe in God, but he believes in God out of a scared fear. He believes in God out of fear. So he's the most pernicious of all, according to Plutarch. Now, superstitions basically, if you really look into it, they basically hinge on two kinds of senses. Like a little bit earlier, Neil was saying, one is fear, and this is what Sigmund Freud would call the unheimlich, the fear of the uncanny, something that is unfamiliar, something that we do not understand. And the other thing that comes into superstition is the feeling of abjection, which Julia Kristeva in The Powers of Horror talked about. And abject is where meanings dissolve, where meaning doesn't make any sense anymore. We do not understand. So it goes into an interstitial liminality. So that is where, abjection comes in. The most areas where abjection comes in is death, birth. That is why you'll find that there are so many superstitions which are concerned around, death and birth. There are so many superstitions. Like, there are countries, I think it's in Laos, they will take the placenta after the birth and they will put it on the highest branch of the tree in the hope that birds will eat it. And if the birds eat it, then the child is supposed to have a long life, And then again, when it comes to death, in our Indian part of the country also, we have 1,001 superstitions concerning death. Now, studies have shown that belief in superstition can have a lot of effect on our performances. There are studies, the most famous among the studies is one made by, it was in 2010, if I'm not really mistaken, by Lysan Damish and Barbara Sobre. They said that they experimented with a little golf ball. And they said that if they told the people who were being experimented upon that the golf ball that day had been very lucky, then the persons are more likely to push the golf ball into the cup than they are if they are not told this. So, and then we have 1,001 examples, like Mohinder Amarnath, he carried that little red hanky in his pocket. Steve Waugh carried a red hanky in his pocket, which was given by his grandparents. Zahid Khan had that yellow handkerchief. Wade Boggs, the former New York Yankees baseball player, he had this belief that if he ate chicken, then he hit the ball really well. and he ate chicken every single day for 20 or so years, so much so that he became such an expert that he even wrote a cookbook called, Fowl Tips, that fowl with a W. So superstitions have always been there. Now, how do they work? Why are superstitions so, why do they stick around so much? Like Neil said, that even days will go by and one's kind of superstition might be gone, but another kind will fill in the gap. So superstitions somehow seem very universal. Now, there are some principles that the psychologists and anxiety experts, they have defined a number of principles. One of the chief principles is called the principle of confirmation bias. So what this mean to say is that there is a natural tendency in our mind that we search for information which will bolster our viewpoint, and that is why we sometimes even misremember information that would contradict our belief. There is another theory, which is the principle of illusory correlation. Illusory correlation means, you only tend to focus on the times where your superstition had been followed by success. You tend not to think and not to remember those times when success arrived without the intervention of superstition, or when superstition failed. Then we have something that is called the principle of illusions of control. As human beings, we always want to be in control. And when we are not in control, it makes us queasy, it makes us really uneasy. So by eating chicken like red balls or keeping a red hanky in your pocket, you believe that you're in control because nothing can go wrong now. Then I think basically at the back of everything is a fear of tempting fate. We are scared to tempt fate. So this gives birth to a plethora of superstitions and what is commonly also known as jinx, something that is known as jinx. Now, Jane Rison is an American psychologist who has done a lot of study about this superstition, this aspect of superstition. And she says that we have two systems in our mind. One she calls system one, which is basically the quick acting intuitive system, and the other is what she calls system two, which is the more deliberative, rational system which thinks it out. Now, according to Rison, she says that when thinking about a superstition, our intuitive mind jumps into the fray and wants to go along with the superstition. But our rational side, it wants to correct our intuitions and kind of like reject the magical thinking, but somehow it just gives in. Most of the time we give into our superstition. So like Abhinav was saying, on a dark night when a cat crosses your path, you do wait until some other unsuspecting vehicle crosses first. And if the cat is black, it makes us squirm evermore, because the superstition actually harks back to the European era of witchcraft, when witchcraft was a paranoia, and witches were thought to consort with the black cats, and sometimes even shape-shifting witches could turn themselves into a black cat. So black cats were, the fear of number 13, something that we call triskaidikophobia. So number 13, even I'm a little queasy about having number 13. Sometimes you find that in lifts, you don't even have the number 13 there, So these things were there. And then we have these, even in the age of social media, we have these little messages where you are given a message and you're asked to forward it to 100 other people. Unless you do that, you're going to, some harm is going to befall you. Gene Foreman, who was the editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer, he kept forwarding letters like this. And when he was asked why he did it, he said that I'm not superstitious. I just want to avoid bad luck. So, people have this conscious effort not to show that they are superstitious, but they end up being superstitious all the same. And superstition has nothing to do with rationality, because even the most rational people, you would suppose that people who are highly educated would be very rational. So Harvard University, that is a home to a lot of very intellectual people. But even there, they have this campus activity, almost which has become a community kind of activity of rubbing the feet of the statue of John Harvard for good luck. So they do it all the time. Now, rationalists, they have no conflict in their mind. If they are completely rational, they don't have any conflict in their mind. The second kind of people, who are the true believers, who are aware of social taboos against superstitions, but still take precautions against the evil eye and don't give it a second thought. Those people are also not in conflict because they are the believers and they are steadfastly the believers. But it is only the I am in two minds kind of people, who are the conflicted people. So they have the rationality working at one level and they have the superstition working at another level, and they just fall a prey to that. Daniel Kahneman also had a lot of theories about superstitions. Now, one thing that really is a moral political question, because we are talking about social identity and cultural identity. One political question is, how much should we give into superstition? Should superstition be part of the public life? Our personal superstitions cause no public effect, and it just doesn't have, I won't say harm, but it doesn't have any public effect. But the problems arise when people bring miracles or superstitions into public life. That makes us uncomfortable probably because we feel comfortable with the idea that public life or public governance goes according to logic, goes according to rationality. We can remember over here in 1934, after the Bihar earthquake hit, Bihar was hit by a huge earthquake. Gandhiji went to a press conference and he said that this is God punishing us for what we did to the Harijans. And Rabindranath Tagore, who was always pro-untouchable, he always fought for untouchable people. But even he demurred against this, and he said that this is something that should not be allowed, should not be allowed to be spoken, because you are a person who has a lot of followers, and you cannot really, plant superstitions like that in the mind of people from the position of a leader. So there comes the, ethico-moral question. Now that spurred on that huge debate that we know of. Now, so how far we are willing to take superstition in society in the form of a cultural identity, that is the $1 million question. And it is true that, like Neil was saying, that by the way, I have read Neil's books, and the way he writes about Kundara and the way he writes about, J. Alani's forays into the different haunted sites, that's really, really beautiful. And Abhirup's writing is also marvelous, the way he writes about Gaurav Tiwari. Yeah. So that's there. So I'm a big fan. But still, we know that, yes, societies do pivot around a lot of superstitions. But how far should we allow that? I think that is a $1 million question. And on that note of dubiety, I'll end my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. That is really fascinating, especially the psychological aspects you have addressed. Thank you for that. So now we will move on to the question answer session. My first question is to Mr. Avirup Bhar. Sir, your latest book, Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari, which gives an account of the life of India's foremost paranormal investigator Gaurav Tiwari and his foundation, Indian Paranormal Society, is mainly based on real incidents investigated by Gaurav Tiwari and his team. To quote a few lines from this book, there is no single proof on this art that shows that a person has been killed by a spirit. People often get killed or destroyed due to their own fears and beliefs. So we would like to hear about that.
Thank you, Momita, for the question. Firstly, that was a fantastic description from Professor Hazra, as well as a fantastic description from Neil. So if you observe, just one point I wanted to make here before I answer your question. So if you observe Professor Hazra's, points, and if you observe Neil's points, one talked about urban legends, one talked about superstitions, right? So my point is simple: superstitions and urban legends are two different things, you know. So superstition is what you practice or what you want to believe in absence of proof. An urban legend is a myth or a modern folklore, the making out of it. Now, what is the topic that we're talking here? We're talking about the social identity being shaped, right? So I definitely will agree with Neil and with Professor Hazra in a few points here. But I'd also like to believe that, a Kuldhara or a Bhangar fort, if they are haunted and they are not haunted, that's a different story altogether. Like, for example, maybe a paranormal investigator would like to feel and believe that Bhangar is haunted, but then, for example, Mr. Gaurav Tiwari, he did not believe Bhangar was haunted, and he had got sufficient proof for it. Now, is it affecting the people living there? Yes, it's definitely affecting their belief system. But is it is it leading to the social identity? I don't think so. We're talking about social identity here. We're talking about, fine, so for example, cutting nails or cutting hair at night, you know or probably, if you talk about, not going to a people tree because there is a witch sitting there at night. These are superstitions which we have been following since centuries. Like I told you that yesterday's knowledge is today's superstition. So you go to a people tree. Why do you not go to a people tree at night? Because it emits CO2 right at night, and you should not go there, right? So these are, some kind of folklores and urban legends and superstitions which I've been hearing since centuries and since many years. It's shaping our identity in a way. But a place being haunted or not haunted, I don't think that shapes social identity. The urban legends are stories, true, some not true, some exaggerated, which we horror writers, we like to read about, we like to write about. Is it shaping social identity? I don't think so. But it's a fantastic discussion we are having here, and after this discussion, I'll take back a few points from both Neil and Professor Hazra, who were so descriptive. One talked about superstitions, one talked about urban legends. So fantastic points. I'll be listening to both their points once again after this particular session. But I don't think a place, if it's haunted or not haunted, that leads to social identity. That leads to stories. That leads to, urban legends. That leads to a lot of ideas for the horror writer, not to social identity. Coming back to the question, Momita, which is a very interesting question. So we were talking about superstitions, and we were talking about, urban legends. Superstition is anything which you don't believe, which you believe in absence of proof, right? Believing in ghosts is not a superstition. It was, that's what Reverend Gaurav Tiwari believed in, and he clearly said that if you believe in ghosts, it is not a superstition, because if you believe in something in absence of proof, that is superstition. But then there is ample proof that ghosts exist, that there are spirits, right? And that's something which he believed in, and that's what his fantastic team at Indian Paranormal Society, the wonderful people out there, also carry with them, and they take forward his vision and his dream. There was another point which I came across when I wrote Gaurav Tiwari's book, Ghost Hunter. And this is the biggest takeaway I had while writing the book. It's about being empathetic towards spirits. Spirits don't harm you. Right? There is not a single proof in the country or anywhere else that a spirit has killed someone. A spirit is there because there is an afterlife. There is an afterlife, and what is an afterlife, Mamita? An afterlife is basically a phase. It's more of a loop that you're living in after death. I call it the other world, and you're waiting there for the spirit realm. You're waiting there for the reincarnation to happen depending on your karmic pattern in the life you led. But the karmic pattern depends on a lot of things you did in your life, and the time you spend in that afterlife, probably that other world, depends on your karmic pattern. So To each his own. If karmic pattern was good, you will reincarnate earlier. If your karmic pattern was not too good, you will take time to reincarnate. But there is no single proof in the world that a spirit has harmed someone or killed someone. It's about the fears and the superstitions that people have been following uh, through many centuries that have killed people. For example, the ritual killings we hear about in different parts of the country, which happen till date. Uh, what exactly is it? It's killing people, right? But then is it a ghost doing it? No, it's not a ghost doing it. It's not a ghost who is killing people. Yeah, it's superstitions, it's beliefs, it's fear which is killing people. And I don't want to get into hurting religious sentiments, but we are a god fearing nation, we are a god fearing country, right? We probably listen to god men due to two different factors. One, fear. One, will believe that, yes, if this god man has told me that I need to wear this gem on my this finger for so and so days, and on this and this date something good will happen. And you might also be scared that, what if I don't wear these gems or these rings on these fingers on so and so date set by the godman, something bad will happen to me. We are a god fearing nation here. We are scared of a lot of things. We are scared of not following a few rituals. We want to follow them. And whatever deaths you keep hearing about in India due to a ghost killing or a spirit killing, nothing of that sort happens. Spirits or ghosts are not there to harm you. Yes, they definitely exist in the afterlife or in a phase after death and the spirit realm, or entering into the spirit realm before reincarnating. That's a phase. They want to latch onto the physical world due to unfulfilled desires, and there are some spirits out there who don't want to accept that they are dead. You know, they don't believe they are dead. They still want to believe they are alive. Fine, but they don't kill people. They don't kill people. We need to be empathetic towards them because a spirit once lived as well, and that's what Gaurav Tiwari believed in. And that's why I feel as well that whatever deaths happen, it happens because of ritual practices. These are ritual killings. These are due to fear. These are ritual killings. These are not due to a ghost or a spirit or a demon doing something or the other. But yes, we definitely write a lot in the books, or we show a lot in the movies. Yes, it always sounds good when you read it. It looks good when you watch on movies. There is certain level of exaggeration when you watch a movie or you read a book. But a spirit, I don't believe there are evil spirits in the world. you know there are spirits whom we need to be empathetic towards. Yes, they want to latch onto the physical world due to unfulfilled desires, and they might do a few things to prove their presence, but they're not here to harm you. Neither will we harm people when we die. We'll be waiting for the afterlife, we'll be waiting for the reincarnation to happen, but we'll not harm people. Maybe we'll have unfulfilled desires and we'll want to roam around in the physical world, but will not harm people. And in the same way, the spirits or the ghosts who exist, they definitely exist, but they're not here to harm people. That's what I feel, and that's what Reverend Gaurav Tiwari also felt, and that's what I wrote the book about. It's about being empathetic towards spirits, respecting them, respecting their space. We also have a space, and they also have a space, so they should not enter our space, and we should not enter their space. To each his own. That's what Momita.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for shedding light on this. So my second question to you is that every culture has its own urban legends and it related myths. So what do you think contribute to the formation of these beliefs and how it in turn contributes to the formation of social identity?
Okay, this is the discussion we are having, right? So we had some fantastic points from Neil. We had some fantastic points from Professor Hazra, and very descriptive in nature. Like I said earlier, I don't feel urban legends define the social identity. Yes, superstitions do. What are superstitions? We have talked about it over and over again, but there is a history behind each and every superstition we follow. For example, I just talked about people tree. Why don't we go to a people tree at night? Because trees emit CO2. Or why don't we cut nails uh, or cut here in the evening? Because many centuries ago there was no electricity, and it was not possible to cut your hair or probably cut your nails in the evening. you know and that's been passed down across generations and centuries. And that's what we have been believing in. Yesterday's knowledge is today's superstition, like I quoted earlier. So many examples like this. If I have to talk if I talk about women not going to temples during menstruation. Why don't women go to the temples during menstruation? Because there was a time when there were no sanitary napkins, and there were no painkillers. So they were asked to stay back at home and take some rest and not visit the temples during menstruation, right? So these are things which we followed many years ago, many centuries ago, which have been passed down across generations, and we have been believing this because we have been brought up in such a way. We have been told these by our parents, and our parents were told this by their parents, and so on and so forth. So yes, superstitions do add to the social identity, and superstitions can be good and bad as well. For example, you wearing a lucky t-shirt and watching a cricket match because you want Sachin Tendulkar to win is also superstition, but then it's good. And it's also leading to a social identity, right? There are so many people like you who are wearing a lucky t-shirt. My father is a big cricket fan, unlike me. I'm not at all into sports, but then my father is a big cricket fan. He always wears a lucky t-shirt when he watches cricket matches. He's totally excited when there is a cricket match, and he wants his favorite player to win. And he wears his lucky t-shirt. It's a yellow t-shirt which he wears. That's a superstition as well, right? And that is also social identity, because there are so many people like him who probably wear lucky t-shirts and they watch a cricket match, right? So that leads to social identity. Uh, Definitely does. Urban legends are more of stories and myths that we hear of, which are based on superstitions. Some true, some not true, some exaggerated, uh, which sound really good. Does it lead to a social identity? I will have to think about this after this session. There are a few valid points by Neil. There are a few valid points by Professor Hazra. But I definitely feel that it's superstitions which form certain cultural identity and social identity. Let the urban legends be written in books and shown on movies. They look good there, they sound good on paper. Yeah, Amita. Mute. Yes.
Sorry. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your views. So moving next to Professor Aprajita Hajra. Ma'am, my first question to you is that you have done an extensive research on Gothic, especially 18th and 19th century Gothic literature. You are the author of some brilliant books like The Terrible Beauty, Her Hideous Progeny, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and Marlowe the Muse's Darling. What do you think are the major differences between 19th century Gothic literature and Gothic in present time, and how has it evolved with time? Over to you, ma'am.
Well, Gothic, when we talk about the theoretical aspect of it, I have done most of my research on Gothic as it is seen in the western part of the world. Now, when Horace Walpole wrote his The Castle of Otranto, which is supposed to be the grandfather of all Gothic, so that was in 1764, he showed ghosts that were very grotesque, very bizarre, very macabre, and larger than life. And they were safely shut away behind trapdoors or dungeons or such other haunted places. They had a designated haunted place for them. So you knew that they are not part of the quotidian world that you and I live in, and they would not plague you unless you opened a portal or crossed a line or told the veil to the other world. Like, Abhirut was saying a little bit earlier that spirits might be there and they are in their own world, and we are in our own world. If we do not if we do not step on each other's toes, then things should be all right. But Gothic literature, as it has evolved down the ages, it has often seen the unheimlich that Sigmund Freud talked about, the uncanny. Gothic literature has seen that feeling of uncanny crawling out of the confines of the stock paraphernalia of the Gothic in spatio-temporal terms, and it has begun to invade the lives of normal people figuratively, not literally, figuratively, so much so that the crippling fear that was once set aside for fictional ghosts now messes with your mind through horrific interpersonal relationships, or what Ilan Goldberg calls cultural horror. Because Gothic, is not just about ghosts. It is basically about horror, about terror, about fear, about sublime, about a romantic kind of world. So it is not just the spirits or the ghosts which scare you. The ghosts that are now scaring us is more in the what psychological Gothic deals with in the modern era, in the contemporary era, is a lot of contemporary writers in the West, starting right from Edgar Allan Poe to Arthur Machen to Henry James to Joyce Carol Oates, Ruth Rendell, John Hawkes. They are more into psychological horror. It is, and psychological horror is even more horrifying because you can't run from the ghosts of the mind or shut the portal on them like you could with the good old spirits of yore that Horace Walpole talked about, or Anne Radcliffe talked about. It is a dystopia that you are part of, So that is terrifying. Like Joyce Carol Oates in her Expensive People, she starts her novel by saying, I am a child murderer, a murderer who is not a murderer who murders children, but a murderer who is a child. And then slowly, as the novel progresses, you find a very, very strained relationship between the mother and the son, because the mother is putting impossible kind of pressure on the son to be best at whatever he touches. Now, isn't that a problem that even contemporary, mother-child relationships suffer from? So those are some of the ghosts of the mind, the demons of the mind that we find very difficult to run away from. Relationship problems, cultural horror, something that Ellen Goldberg calls cultural horror. People, the womanhood of a woman not being valued enough. All these things are within cultural horror. These are horrific things. These are ghosts which you cannot run from because these belong to the quotidian world that we live in. So this is where contemporary Gothic is leading us into, and that is terrifying. So I hope that answers your question, Momita.
You're muted, Momita.
Momita, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, ma'am. This was really insightful. So my second question to you is that do paranormal beliefs form independent subsets or manifest a higher order construct? Is it grounded to define magical, paranormal, or superstitious beliefs as category mistakes that confuse core knowledge?
That's a big mouthful of a question. Okay, I'll try to answer it as best as I can. Again, since I'm talking from a theoretical point of view and I'm not really well versed in the Gothic as it is in real life, like Neil is or Abhirup is, I can only talk from the theoretical point of view. Now, Lovecraft once in his 1945 study, which was titled Supernatural Horror in Literature, he said that the oldest and the strongest emotion of mankind is fear, something that Neil was also talking about a little earlier. It's fear. And the oldest and strongest kind of fear is the fear of the unknown, something that I have been talking about as the Freudian Unheimlich, the uncanny. So it's a fear of the unknown, and the fear of the unknown is one of the chief, the chief reasons behind superstitions. Again, the literalistic belief in the supernatural has always been, and I guess will always be, a prerequisite for the Gothic. And superstitions presuppose a very strong belief in the supernatural. In fact, Sigmund Freud, in his 1919 essay, Das Unheimliche, the uncanny, he hints at the assumption that beneath the surface of the also very civilized society and all the rational skepticism that we swear by, there survives the matrix of irrational, or should I say non-rational superstitious beliefs harking back to humanity's past. So I would not say that superstitions are a category mistake, because category mistakes entail a kind of presupposition failure, which is not the case here. So I'd rather call superstition a subset, like you mentioned it, of the Gothic, as and not a subgenre though, but it is a subset, as you rightly said. So, yes.
Okay,
Monica?
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your views. So, moving on to our third panelist, Mr. Neil De Silva. So, my first question to you is that your book, Haunted Real Life Encounters with Ghosts and Spirits, gives an account of Bangalore Fort and many other haunted places in India. So, we would like to know if these places really have something spooky, or these are merely part of social myths.
That was what I set out to explore when I wrote these books. So, Haunted is one book that I co authored with Jay Alani, who is a very famous paranormal investigator. And there's another book, which also I should mention, otherwise I'd be remiss, and that is The Spirits Talk to Me, which is co authored with Sarbajit Mohanty, who is also a paranormal investigator. So, since I
I
have
read that
written,
book as well.
I'm very happy to know that. Thank you so much. So, since I've written two nonfiction books with two paranormal investigators, it was a kind of a challenge for me. And I'll try to compare and talk a little bit about how these two books were different and at the same time similar. Uh, Both paranormal investigators, of course, had their own beliefs, have their own beliefs. They are still working in their fields, and they have their own kind of uh, thought process as to what hauntings are, what ghosts are, how they go about researching on them, exploring, how they do that entire investigation. It was fascinating for me to know how they did it. That was the first thing. And when I met them, I met Jay Alani first. That book came out first. So Jay's thing was that you listen to my stories. These are my stories, and then you write it in the way you want it. I don't want you to act. I don't want to actually impose my thoughts on you, but what you interpret from the stories that I tell you as an author, that is what you take and write down in the book. So when I heard Jay's stories, Jay told me what he did, what how he went about his investigations. He refrained from actually sharing his actual ideology and belief system with me, but that, of course, came out through the stories that he narrated in the audio transcripts, and that is where I have created a voice for him, which is his own voice, of course, and that is how the stories came into being. And Jai went to places like Bhangar, Kuldhara, as you mentioned, and all those are in the book. Whereas when we came to the Spirits Talk to Me, Sarbajit gave me a guideline of the entire procedure that he follows, his team follows. He works with a team along with the paranormal equipment that they use and how that is utilized for exploring whether ghosts are really there, whether there is energy, and his own thought that ghosts are energy, they are manifest in some manner. And of course, like Abhirup has rightly pointed out about Gaurav Tiwari's beliefs, which I also abide by, that that's an unknown world and we should not trigger it too much. So that is the belief that even Sarbajit shares. And he has said that you have to be very empathetic to that. So that one word, empathetic, is a very common word which all paranormal investigators work with, because
Yes.
this is a place of reverence. This is what they believe in. I would not tag myself into this because I'm not a paranormal investigator. So, as far all the research that I've done on different paranormal investigators, I have found that whether they believe that ghosts exist or not. Again, there were two types of paranormal investigators. One who believe that ghosts exist and they are out there to find out some evidence of ghostly activity, paranormal activity. Whereas there is another set of paranormal investigators also who do not believe that ghosts exist. They are skeptics and they are out to disprove the existence of ghosts through scientific evidence or whatever. They are trying to do that. So I have seen that there were both places, and there were people who fall between the spectrum as well. So what I had to do was to just find out their voices and write the stories. And thankfully, as Professor Hazara has read those two books, I hope she will uh, agree with the fact that the voices have come out as different, because this is also what my readers have told me, that they are different, because I tried to write the stories according to what they said. Now, I'll just close this with one important sentence which Professor Hazra said, and which actually becomes a kind of a backbone for all my writing when I'm writing non-fiction. And that is, the fear of the unknown is the raison d'etre for horror. For horror, that's why horror exists, because we fear the unknown. We don't know what is there, and that is what we all do. So whether we are writing non-fiction, and there were three non-fiction books among us here between the panelists. So whether we write non-fiction, which is a kind of an exploration of the unknown, or whether we are also writing fiction. Now, fiction is a whole different zone, but in fiction, what we do is we create our fantasies, we create our own world. And when I write fiction, my first point is to entertain through fear. That's what I do. Non-fiction
Absolutely.
on that. And also, because you asked me whether I believe whether Kuldhara and Bhangad are haunted or not, so my answer is no, I don't. And the same thing comes through even my books. Jayalani says that Bhangad is not haunted. Kuldhara might be, but you know what happens is, this is the entire psychology of the place, the time, the situation that you are in, how you go there. I think the ghosts, all of them, they exist in our mind more than in the universe out there. And our mental ghosts are the ones that actually project themselves onto us more. We do not know whether there are really ghosts in the afterlife, or from the afterlife coming to us from that other dimension. We do not know that, but we definitely know that we create our own ghosts and we get scared of them. We create our own phobias.
That's right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for answering this. So my second question to you is that your other book, Avalai and the Charm, which is a collection of short stories revolving around the superstition among Indians with regard to the use of lemon and chilies to ward off evil eye. If you can shed some light on this for us to understand how and what inspired you to pen this book. Do these evil spirits which you have mentioned really exist, or it is just the superstition prevailing among urban people, mostly due to their lack of scientific knowledge or rational outlook?
Thank
Over
you.
to you, sir.
Thank you for asking me a question on the Evil Eye and the Charm. This is a book I wrote in 2016. It was just my second book, and it came close on the heels of my first book, Maya's New Husband. So, The Evil Eye and the Charm was a collection of six stories, short stories, and I just wrote it as a kind of impulse book. I just wanted to write it. There was not a very much thought gone that went into it. These stories just flowed out of me. They were just something that was stagnating within me, and I just wanted to put them out, and that's how the book came. So the Evil Eye and the Charm, as even the cover shows, it's about the Nimbu Mirchi chapter. There's a Nimbu Mirchi, that lemon chili thing. So the lemon chili thing is so ubiquitous in our culture. It goes across cultures, because uh, we believe that it's a Hindu system, but I have seen it in other religions also. In offices and shops and all, people hang it outside their doors. Auto rickshaw people, the car owners, they will hang it from their vehicles. I've seen this lemon mirchi charm everywhere ever since, as a child, I used to see that, ask questions about it. Like why is that there? What is the significance of this? And as I grew up, I did my little bit of reading here and there, and then I found out that when I was actually writing the book, I did a little bit of more intensive research. I found out two reasons behind the lemon chili charm. One was a more rational kind of reason, which I will just tell you. So, in those olden days, when towns were very far from each other, when people had to go walking from one village to another, from one town to another, they had to usually cross forests and stuff like that. So they used to take with them lemon and chili, because and a lot of water. So that's what they used to take, because they lemon and chili. When you take it in a combination, it suppresses your hunger. So you can survive for a longer time, and you have water, so it takes care of your dehydration. And this is what people used to set out with. And because they used to go with lemon and chili, it somehow became a part of the superstition that you have to take this lemon and chili and go when you are starting something new. So that is how later on, maybe, I don't know, I was not there to see this evolution, but later on, maybe they started hanging it in other establishments also, because just it was a belief that, okay, this is it. So there is no superstition connected to it, but it is an evolved kind of superstition. Somewhere there is also a mythological take on this, that lemon and chili, the taste, the acidic taste and the spicy taste, when it is in a combination, this is a favorite taste of Alakshmi. Alakshmi is a goddess. She is the sister of Lakshmi. And while Lakshmi brings prosperity, Alakshmi brings adversity. So what people do is they hang lemon chili outside their doors, so that whenever a Lakshmi comes, she will have the lemon chili, be happy with it, and go away. She will not enter the house. So this is the mythological reason. Now I do not know whether the mythological reason came first or the evolved reason came first, but this was it, and it was fascinating. So I wanted to just write some stories based on this, not about this, but taking the lemon chili as a motif, because all the stories have the lemon chili as a kind of a metaphor for what is happening, and every story is interpretative. There is no closed ending to it. They are all open-ended stories where the reader tries to think whether what happened in these stories, the sequence of events, is because of the lemon chili charm or despite it. So it is a book of science versus superstition. And again, just to close, I was really happy with the way the book performed, because even in the US, the book was read a lot. It is a kind of a culture thing, which was very exotic to to my foreign readers, and I got a lot of reviews on that. So thank you very much. It really made my day, to hear a question about the evil eye and the charm. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. This is really interesting. So, with this, we bring this session to an end. Thank you very much, dear panelists, for being here with us and giving us your valuable time. It is indeed a very enriching and interesting session. We got to know a lot about the paranormal and urban legends and related superstitions. Once again, thank you very much to all, drawing the session to a closer here. Good night, everyone.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
having us.
Thank
It was a
you.
lovely session, Momita.
Thank you for, yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely,
everyone.
absolutely.
Wonderful